Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the newest album from Phantogram, called 3. Well, it's about damn time I talk about this. In fact, I'm a little bit bewildered why it has taken me this long. Sure, I've been really busy and there's been no shortage at all of more records that are flooding in through the last few weeks of this year, but I have to admit a certain disinterest in this record going in. Part of this is because I covered Phantogram's last album, Voices, back in early 2014, and I didn't really care for it. But even that's not really quite true from what I remember, and that's the bigger problem. I had to go back to my previous review to recall anything about that record, and even a quick re-listen through it didn't really stick much for me. Most because it felt like the poppier nature of the writing didn't really fit all that well with the darker, fuzzier, more heavy electronic production. It didn't flatter some of their stronger melodies. It was decent, I just didn't really remember or care to look back at it. And yet, despite everything, the critical reviews have been mixed to positive on this album, including from some people that I otherwise respect a great deal. They said it went louder and heavier and brought in a lot more bombast, which, okay, that could be promising if the writing and delivery picked up the slack, so I left it on my schedule, and thus, thanks to voting on Patreon, it somehow wound up at the top of said schedule, so okay, what the hell. How did 3 by Phantogram turn out? Well, okay, this is a specimen that I haven't heard in some time, an album that I will happily say is quite good. It's smart, it's well framed, it's certainly more distinctive than their last album. I can see why people like it, and I can see myself remembering more of it, but it's an album that I appreciate a lot more than I like myself. I've gone through this album a good dozen or so times, which is pretty easy given how short it is, but not to the point where it's underwritten, which does attest to its quality. Again, it's a good album, but the spark really isn't igniting for me on a sonic level. As such, I can't really rate it in good conscience as high as I would otherwise like to, because I can appreciate the quality here, but if anything that I describe here is up your alley, I definitely think you should check it out, because again, there is quality here. So okay, let's get to the roots of this record and why it will find an audience that isn't me, and that's in the instrumentation and production. And let's start off with our two singers, Sarah Barthel and Josh Carter. And yeah, they're both pretty good, but I'm not entirely sure the mixing or production entirely flatters them. Granted, that was also an issue on Voices, and it seems a little less blatant here, mostly because Barthel's smoky tones were able to get a little bit more room to breathe, so she can sound a bit like Karen O when she wants to, which on songs like Same Old Blues with the gospel sample sound, it's very reminiscent of a cut from Mosquito. Carter, he only takes lead on Barking Dog, the rest of the time either as the obvious duet partner or on the harmony, and it's clear that he should stay there. He's just not in the same league, and he's not really well balanced against Barthel. Granted, both vocalists are often fighting amidst a blur of reverb and choppy vocal sampling and overdubs, not even counting the stuttered syllables on Your Mind that really weren't needed. It's an unnecessary addition to that songwriting. But hell, if I was looking for an adjective to describe a lot of this album, choppy would be it, and I think it's the fundamental reason why the sound doesn't quite click for me. Much has been made about how this album got a fair bit heavier, and that's entirely true. The beats got thicker, stiffer, and more aggressive. The guitars got more distorted with heavier smolder. Even the synths developed a harsher vibe, which can place them in contrast with a mix that seems less expansive and more focused on capturing a storm locked in a windowless room, that very claustrophobic, cacophonous sound. At least the songs that can feel pretty claustrophobic fast, especially when you add in samples chopped to ribbons in order to flesh out more of the melody that can occasionally feel underserved. But take the big single, You Don't Get Me High Anymore. The hook is very catchy, the noisy compressed blocks of synth do play off the rattle of the percussion line pretty well, and the moments where the mix actually steps back and lets Barthel's more ethereal overdubs take lead to a solid climax. But it isn't until the bridge where we actually get a guitar and a bass line, and it highlights my biggest issue with this album, the low end and the bass. Much of the bass tones that show up in the synth or in the beats are very choppy and staccato, often cutting through the haze of grinding guitar and synth that drive the mid-range, intended to emphasize the harsh, jittery nature of these sorts of songs. But it also means that any attempt to build groove off the guitars feels kind of compromised, because that deeper blur and flow just isn't in the bass, providing it shows up at all. Now this means that nearly all the climaxes on this album feel a little undercut to me, hemmed in from really exploding with that low end. And yeah, in parallel with the lyrical themes, that does make sense, as the majority of this album is at war with its own head. Take a song like Answer. Even as I really didn't like that piano constantly wobbling off tune and that very thin clicking beat, when that guitar does roar in on the bridge, it is awesome, huge post-rock inspired swell. I really got into it, and yet all we get in the low end is percussion instead of a bass guitar to really hammer it home. It leads to a choppy, jagged sort of album. And again, if you like that sound, I get why. But for me, the choppy sampling that Common already used on Kingdom for Same Old Blues, or that loop on Cruel World, or the noisy, flattened, very 90s gurgle of Run Run Blood, they just don't stick for me. And when you throw in more elegant strings on Funeral Pier or Barking Dog, the fact they aren't blurred better into the mixes, again, kind of a distraction. A lot of jagged pieces that don't quite fit together well. Now, granted, all that hemmed-in dissonance does fit with the album, especially when you dig into the lyrics and themes. And in that lane, it's a pretty nasty piece of work, the sort that you would expect with real struggles with depression that lash both outwards and inwards, from the disillusionment and boredom of Same Old Blues, to the curdled frustration of You Don't Get Me High Anymore, to the attempt at a gracious breakup on Cruel World that really isn't all that gracious. And then the blank-eyed repetition of Barking Dog, set from the bathroom floor as time seems to slow down forevermore. It brings out the best line of this record: hurt people too. And that mingled anger and guilt is a really powerful moment on a song that I otherwise only think is okay. But necessarily, the rest of the album has to rebuild off that point, and this is where things get nasty. From the possessive but utterly dispassionate Your Mind, to the search for clarity on Answer against too many words saying nothing, only to find that there might not actually be an answer at the end. In the last few songs, the thematic arc becomes less about getting over the depression or finding an answer, so much as just living with all of it. And from songs like Calling All and Run Run Blood, in today's increasingly bleak world, that might be all we can do. Yeah, there's a pretty sharp nihilistic streak to this album, but by the end there at least seems to be some sort of twisted functionality restored, hungry and defiantly owning one's open wounds, which, yeah, I guess that's progress, although I think it might only be a short-term thing. But you know what? Those themes, that internal instability and frustration and self-flagellation, it does on some level fit with the instrumentation. It definitely works, maybe even too well. But then again, I also realize that there are plenty of nihilistic albums that embark on similar paths and arcs that I enjoy the sound and flow a lot more. Whereas Phantogram's 3 doesn't really hit that sonic point for me. Again, if you like this choppier sort of blend of samples, guitar, and synth into a pretty aggressive package with well-framed lyrics, and again, it is heavier, you'll probably like this. For me though, given the song doesn't really quite click here, I'm giving this a very strong 6 out of 10 and definitely a recommendation. Again, I get the impression that Phantogram just probably aren't for me, probably won't be checking out any more of their albums, but if anything I described is up your alley, definitely check this out. You'll probably really enjoy it, and I hope you do. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got the poll up here, so everyone else who loved this album, there's your opportunity to tell me, because I expect this album to click with a lot of people. The fact it didn't with me, I understand that, and I really hold nothing against you. I get why people like this. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get into the Patreon that I mentioned, the link's right over here. 3 times a week you vote on albums that are coming up in the schedule, and the higher contributors on Saturdays get to add albums to that schedule. Or even if you go to the very high level, maybe even add a movie so I can make some truth to my tagline. But enough of all that, links right there, check it out. I'd be happy to see you guys hop on board. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.